Greetings. I would like to
tell some folks about what I've been thinking about and studying about, which is right to rule, and also how does God rule versus how does Satan rule? What does healthy rulership and servantship or healthy surrender look like? Some interesting things that I've read, and I've been reading some Russian history books and some medieval history books at the library, and I've been training at a fight gym for a little bit, enjoying the last of civilization before it collapses. There's an interesting thing that I read talking about in the 1700s, Polish law stipulated that not a single important position in civilian state employment could be gained without an individual having fought in a war. For example, now we have these politicians who've never fought for anything and barely earned anything. I mean, I would pay them about $8 an hour, me personally. They're sending people to war and they're making decisions which are costing people lives, and it should not be. You can see, this is the 1700s in Poland. This was a hard rule. You can see the strength of Poland today as a country. As they rejected immigration, their government was already accepting it, but the Polish patriots, they stood at the border and ran them out. When they tried to get them in, they ran them out. Now, one of the things they didn't do, I don't believe they killed any of their, I don't hear about any such violence. If you have 4 police officers which decided to do something that's against the country, and you have 20 citizens that show up and say, no. What are they gonna do? They go back to where they came from. And that kind of non-violent is a good way to, non-violent standing against things that are wrong is a good way to do it. Well, maybe if you have to get a little violent, that's okay, as long as it's not lethal. This is interesting too, because this is another medieval book, a quote from a medieval book, and I've been thinking about the Masons and how they run a lot of the world, yet they rule from the shadows. They're too cowardly to come out. They say, oh, it's necessary. Everybody's got secrets. Even the Christians had secrets. Because their lives depended on it. But if that is your primary, and your life is associated, then you're probably crooked. But here's something. I think this is from, I want to say 1100. This quote. I forgot to write it down. The guild. Also, the word guild is without the U in this. The Guild of Masons was one of the best organized and most exclusive in the Middle Ages. To become a Royal Master Mason was one of the leading figures in the country. Was to be one of the... And they talked about how God creates... Man, there's a lot of bugs here. God creates, and I wrote a note that said, God creates the heavens, the sun, the moon, and all the elements. God made us to be creators like Him. And I also took a picture of some of the signs that the Masons had in the beginning, and I don't see anything wrong or satanic about it, because I think one of the biggest things in the beginning, the Masons were actually doers and builders, and they made a union to protect themselves and their craft. And I think from what I've studied, which, we can only access from that time period a few things, but their signs look to be like a regular sign with nothing weird or satanic about it. But I do see a lot of, the open part of Masonism is still biblical and Christian, but I have seen people and signs and symbols and different things that the root of it being satanic have been corrupted in our day and age. And the original Masons weren't that secret, because they could, if you have to have your whole, most of what you do and who you are as a secret, you're probably a crooked individual. You probably don't have any right to rule, because the difference between God and Satan is God made everything. He's the author of everything. He's the builder. He's the one who earned, who breathed the breath of life into us. And so when we think that we're going on our own, in any case, in this life, we're not. Probably we're following Satan. God says, I loved you, I breathed the breath of life into you, you're my child. I desire, one of the things that God says, he desires openly that we are his servant. That sounds like a bad thing. It's not. You will, on this earth, serve one thing or the other, either light or darkness. The difference between Satan, he says, come and do whatever you want. I'll give you all these things. You'll be free. That's what he told her. What did he tell Eve? He said, God, doesn't want you to be like him. You'll have knowledge like God and be like gods. Raising themselves up beyond their station. And you'll find different people like Joseph Smith, very impressive character, or different people in history who went beyond their station and jeopardized their own soul. Well, no one can say they weren't impressive, but they said, oh, I'm a prophet in every word. Give me your 14-year-old daughter. It's not prophecy. And then to this day, it is sung still. Songs to the man. Satan wants people to raise themselves up, doing quote godly things above their station. But if you think about God, he wants us to be like him and to be his children. Now, what's the difference between what was the Roman Caesar who claimed himself to be a god and it was eaten by worms? You know the story that I'm talking about. Obviously, he went beyond his station and God ended his existence, or he sent an angel to do it. And us being like Christ, being good children of God. It's a mindset, a line that we don't cross. We claim to be God's children. We claim to be like God, little g. We can claim to be little g, God being the master and the father, and we being the children, the offspring. He breathed his breath of life into us. We have a piece of his soul in us, I believe, in every person. But if we trust in ourselves and in the flesh too much, we become like darkness. Even though in the moment it might feel like light, the end result is darkness and separation from God. And as history goes further and further towards the judgment day, and I believe we don't know the time or we don't know the hour when Jesus will return, but I believe in the principle of Sodom and Gomorrah. When there's not enough good in something, God will destroy it. And for the time being, like I can see in my own life, God allows us to be tested to see the hardiness of our soul and the desire to do good even when it hurts. And that's a really beautiful thing, and sometimes it's hard to do that. But so another thing that's a little bit off what I've been talking about, what I want to share it too, is from another medieval book. And it says, in the course of ensuing wars and civil wars, it had become clear that if a defense were to be effective, it must be under local control. And this is something that sounds like a no-doubt thing, but in fact, you are not controlled by what's best for you locally. You're controlled by, again, politicians in faraway places and elites in high places who have sacrificed almost nothing and rode on the shoulders of better men than themselves to get where they are. And they would quickly send our sons into war to die, having not sacrificed anything for themselves. And Jesus talks about the Pharisees binding heavy burdens on other men's shoulders and necks, around their necks, and they themselves are not willing to bear any burden even with their little finger. not the kind of leadership that you want. And I just wanted to share these things because I'm thinking, considering, and understanding where, and I want to do another video about, well, I guess I should make a comment about my last video, as I was talking about I desire submission, but also, like God, He made everything for us and He desires us to submit to Him. He has all the power to force us, but He doesn't force us. That's another difference. We would have to have a long conversation between a tyrannical government and an authoritative government. You need to have some authority and some rules that are enforced, otherwise you have no structure. However, you don't want somebody who's just beating down and bearing down 24/7 on, the people, and requiring. See, God gives us the freedom to do as we please, but He says this path is good for you. This path is what I have made for you. And that's the same way I am with women. And when I say, I desire submission, but they don't have to. They can do as they please. But when they surrender, when you surrender to God, your life to God, or when a godly feminine woman surrenders herself to a godly man, and in the beginning that should only be like her hand or her lips or her time to talk, and then after you're married it should be more. Well, of course, everything is surrendered both ways when you're married. And so in relationships, there's always give and take, and if I completely devote myself to something, and even if I conquer it and I'm the best at it, that thing also controls me. When you become the master of something, or in some cases someone, it's only if it's desired and chosen. That thing or that person also becomes the master of you in a way. For example, Tom Brady. He was the master of football, but it also mastered his life to the point where he chose it over his wife. Of course, she also chose other things over him, but anyways, that's the point. If you master something so fervently, you devote yourself to it, it will also master you. But be careful how much you give yourself to any device or idea, whether it be light or darkness. And those are the things I'd like to share with you.